Hello, MakerDAO community, and thank you for joining another SES status update call. I'm Retro, a core contributor at SES, and today I'm joined by our facilitator, Juan, to discuss a new approach or adjustments to the current budget allocation framework. We're calling this project-based budget allocation with a focus on the near-term improvements that could be made in addressing the challenges that the DAO is facing in the bear market, as well as making a sustainable solution for the future. As always, please feel free to utilize the question feature in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand throughout the presentation to keep this engaging. And we'll address questions during a break in the action. With that, then, I'll go ahead and hand the mic over to Juan, and you can kick it off.
Thank you, Retro, and yes, welcome everyone. This is the call from SES where we try to solve all the DAO's problems, as Khan said. But what we wanted to present today is this new approach that we were envisioning for the DAO. Mainly because we are seeing a lot of the things that are broken within the process, and we wanted to share this with you to potentially get feedback. So this the main objective of the call is to get a lot of feedback on this method. A lot of questions. We thought a lot about it, but I'm sure that we're missing some important parts that we want to get from you. So yes, as Retro was saying, please use the Q&A, and we're happy to hear, or at least to share our thoughts and to hear any contrarian opinion, so we can make this better. So with that, let's start. So let's start at the very basics, right? Like what do MKR holders want? So they want value. That's the holy grail for those wondering what the meme is. And when we're speaking about improving the system, it's usually completed work that generates the value. It could be a feature, it could be an integration, it could be brand awareness. There's a lot of ways where we can provide value, but it is usually through work that we create the value. And then there's a lot of these support functions that usually support the value creators. So when we're thinking about any type of organization, it's always the makers and the managers, to exaggerate the separation, but it's a bit like that. So right now there's this issue that we do not know how much we're spending on the protocol and how much we're spending on the DAO, and this is extremely important, because when we are generating bureaucracy, it should be done very consciously and very mindfully, because ideally this is again a support function to generate value and not just bureaucracy because we like it, or to keep middle managers in position. So if you were to tell someone, okay, so MakerDAO is a protocol, it's governed by the MKR holders, and what they want is value. Usually the value comes through work. They would think that this is the methodology that we currently have. So yeah, MakerDAO holders are the ones directing the work, right? So yeah, we started using this framework that we created a long time ago. I think a year and a half ago, maybe, if my memory serves me. But we did see that in the beginning, and yeah, jumping to the next slide, this is a bit what we have. And there are two concepts here. So before starting on the graph below, we see that the MKR holders have different tools to assign budget to the workforce that then creates the work and ideally the value. So the four tools right now are the MIP 39 and 41, which is add budget or add a facilitator to a given core unit. Same thing with the core unit, which has a mandate. So the mandate is what the core unit wants to achieve. And then we have the MIP 13, which is kind of like the declaration of intent, which is, okay, the MKR holders want to work towards this. We're going to vote this on chain to make it clear. And then the MIP 55, which is like the special purpose fund, that's to create projects. So we have these 4 tools, but potentially the impact of the tool is very, very limited because the MKR holders are, or to put it the other way around, the workforce is standing between the MKR holders and the value. So this is a bit what's happening today, which is the core units are a complete black box. They are working on different projects. Some of the core units are clearer than others in being explicit about it and making sure that it's being known by the MKR holders. But basically, the MKR holders have no control over these projects. Again, they can issue some declaration of intent, which is a bit of a suggestion or a nudge, but it's not completely binding. So you end up with these type of MIPs which say everyone should stop their work and work on this until it gets passed. Otherwise, you cannot work on anything else, which is not ideal for structuring work. Again, if a core unit wants to work on 3 projects and the MKR holders just want one of them, they are forced to accept the 3 of them. So that's another of the shortcoming. But basically, the workforce has full control over what's being done, how the prioritization, and also keeping the protocol on. So whatever is running the protocol or keeping the lights on, and growing or going to new directors. So moving on, again, I don't see any questions so far, but moving on, this is what happens in the bull market, which is okay. It would be really cool to work on this new project. Right now, no one's taking care of that. We should go out there and find another core unit to do that. We can assign them budget. And then on the value, we did see some of the delegates or some of the community members saying like, hey, should we review what the current teams were doing or try to structure that? And then it's like, well, not really. We're about growth. We're not about cutting costs. So no, like we should think like a startup, and we should fund pretty much anything that comes our way. And then when the market turns, we already saw what happens. It's like we should cut everything down, cut. The opposite happened. It doesn't matter if this core unit comes with something which is really, really valuable. It's really about cutting the costs. And then you have the opposite. It's like the uncertainty might actually hurt the workforce, so we shouldn't offboard everything that's not working. So you end up with this with these situations where you're having the wrong discussion. You're talking about the budget instead of talking about so we're mixing budget, we're mixing the performance or how things are done, instead of talking about what things should be done and allocating the budget or the intention towards that. I'm trying to think if there's any point that I'm missing here. I think I've covered everything. But yeah, what this leads is that the current conversation, it's pretty much, I mean, this is the false dichotomy, right? But it's you get these 2 teams, where there's the maker holders versus the core units. The MKR holders are saying this is not working. Why nothing works? There's no value being done, and then the core units are saying the opposite. Well, not the opposite, but they're saying like, well, we don't know what to do. We're just facilitating. Our budget got voted in, so for sure what we're doing is right. And again, we're having the wrong type of conversation. We're discussing the wrong things instead of what should be done. So we don't have any type of actionable measurement tools to support that. This type of conversation, we've seen it in the last couple of weeks or months already, lead to a very toxic type of conversation where you get all these backroom conversations, a lot of gossip, a lot of politics, untested amendment coalitions, and a lot of drama that's completely unnecessary. And it is a bit expected, but we should have the guardrails to not have to care about this type of things, right? So ideally, the MKR holders have a tool to say, we want this done. How do we do it? Let's move forward from that. So addressing the failures of the current tools, as I was mentioning, the core units is all in or all out. So if you're playing a critical role in the for Maker, for keeping the protocol the lights on, to keep the protocol working. Right now, the MKR holders have no way of saying, hey, we want you to keep the protocol going. That's super valuable, but we do not want you to work on whatever it is, right? Like layer 2, reward finance, name it. There's no way of setting that from the MKR holders perspective. Then core units are a black box, so we know very little of what they're doing. And potentially the reporting helps a bit, but we do not have the bandwidth. The delegates do not have the bandwidth, and pretty much no one has the bandwidth to start auditing everything and to see if that produces value and to see if that's aligned with what the MKR holders want. So the black box situation is quite hard, and again the forum is very noisy, so it's quite complicated in general to see what should be done. And also, as mentioned before, the operations are entangled with advancements. So again, if we want something to keep the lights on, we do not know how much of that budget is going to that, or how much actually goes to that part, or to growing into different realms, even if the MKR holders want that or not. So there's no way or no tools to actually do that. Which brings us to what we believe that might be a solution, and this is where we propose something different. So I think it's a bit hard to, well, it's not hard, but it's very different to what we're doing right now. So it might be hard to grasp in the very beginning. But what's happening right now is, as we're saying, there's this the MKR holders funding or defunding core units based on the value or the work that they see or they not see. So yeah, what we're proposing is, what if the work could be projectified in a way, so every single thing that's proposed to the DAO instead is built in a project, and we're going to speak about that in a bit. And then the core units can actually propose these projects to actually get the work done. So as you see in the diagram, a project could be done by several core units. So if you need backend and frontend, you could have a project that has multiple lines in the budget, and then the MKR holders could decide to fund it or not based on that. So it doesn't need to be atomic. You could have the project from several core units as well. And then yeah, if we could have conversations as, okay, this project is delayed and over budget, why is it happening, what has been done, what do we need to do, can someone else take over, do we need to fund it more or not, or is it more important than this other project that it's actually working, yes, no, and have all these type of conversations in a way that provides value to Maker instead of all this politics. Yeah, that's a bit what we envision. So Maker
questions
Oh,
already.
sorry. Oh yeah.
Yeah, if we want
if
to
anyone
hop
wants
into
to
that
jump
real quick.
in the mic, that might be nicer, or if you want, we can read them for you.
Yeah, we'll start this way with Tim's question of asking, isn't this dichotomy ultimately because maker holders cannot and will not create a coherent vision?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is, we need, in a DAO, you need to be able to live with different visions. So potentially delegates or even or maker MKR holders could have different visions, and this could be a bit like making a pizza. Maybe it's a bad analogy, but let's say that you really want pepperoni in your pizza, and some other delegate also wants pepperoni but does not want the pineapple. Then you can make sure that the pepperoni actually gets funded, because both delegates or the majority of the MKR holders are funding that. So you could have a type of vision, and then you could actually work with the plutocracy and the liquid plutocracy to make sure that these projects get funded. Right now, what's happening is that you, as an MKR holder, you fund a core unit that can or cannot. That they give you a mandate, and the mandate is usually very like rosy, and everything will be great, and it includes words like growth, and we're going to make sure that MKR, that Maker is the next best thing. But the truth is that behind that mandate, there's a lot of projects that you might agree with or not, and right now you have no control over that. You can ask for some kind of roadmap, but then there's no way of enforcing that. So this is a way of flipping the workforce and the work to make sure that the vision, whatever the vision is, and it can be multiple visions, and then we can speak about how we organize that vision. But once we flip those things around, it's a way of saying, hey, this is going to get funded, yes or no. Yeah. I don't know if there's any more questions or.
Yeah, we have Assad joining us on stage.
Hey, Assad.
Ask your question.
Hey. Yeah, so I wrote it in the chat too, but I just figured I'd jump on stage and make it a little more interactive. It seems like real world finance is somewhat structured like this, and I know it's not exactly. And like the key difference is that the community proposes deals to I guess the protocol, and then real world finance is asked to provide a domain green light among others, right? But it seems like in a way that you could argue that is a bit like project by project. How would this change the existing way for specifically something like the real world asset pipeline, and what would fix that? Because it seems very broken, obviously, for real world finance today.
Yes, thanks for the question. So we don't want to go too much in detail with the real world finance on this call. We want to make it more abstract. But one of the issues that we see is that potentially real world finance can decide on what to prioritize based on their own it could be their own agenda. It could be because they don't like, and it could be honest. It could not be like, oh, it's entanglement and whatnot. It could be like, I believe that this type of asset should not be there. So basically, what happens is that you get all these core units that are gatekeeping, in a sense, the protocol, even if the MKR holders want to get it done. So what this model would allow is you go out there, let's say you want to build this project and the MKR holders want to fund it. If there's no core unit that wants to do it, it doesn't matter, because you can projectify and say, I'm going to need, I don't know, an engineer to build this adapter. I'm going to need these lawyers, and I'm going to build to need whatever it is. This is going to be 500K. Or at least for the next 6 months. These are the objectives. So once you projectify it, the MKR holders will be like, we really want that. So it doesn't matter if the core units want to do it or not, and then you get rid of the core units are ruining everything. They don't do the work properly. So you get actually, all right, this is the amount of money that we need to get this done, either by these core units or not, and then you move to having these conversations of what do actually MKR holders want, and there's all these trade-offs that we start talking about, instead of this core unit is great, this core unit is not great, I don't like this other guy. So you kind of remove the politics, at least a bit. I don't think that politics are going to go away and everything's going to be perfect, but it's more to the situation of, okay, now we're talking about what we're doing and what we want to do, instead of just having discuss these things of, oh, I don't like this, there's entanglement, oh, but this guy knows this, oh, but this guy has like, it potentially doesn't matter. Like if you're an investor and you really want to fund both things, maybe that's really bad, and it should be pointed out. But if that's what the MKR holders want, why would you stop them there? So I think that's a good point to bring up, but that's what we're trying to achieve here.
As a quick follow-up, and I know there's other people waiting for questions, how do you think about prioritization then? If there's like multiple projects that are being proposed at once, inevitably that will happen. Where does that come into play here?
Yeah, that's we're going to touch upon that. Also, I see a question from David. I think we're touching that as well. So yeah, we can move forward. David, one of the questions that David has is, wait, it would still be coordinated budgeting for maintenance work. So yes, maintaining the work would be a project. So keeping the lights on would be a project, right? So writing the spells or Gov Alpha facilitating the forum, that would also be part of the of a project. This point came up from GovComms not long ago. Like, should we keep doing this or not? Potentially, this would be a project. Should we write the notes? Maybe there's a better word, but sorry, David, if I'm butchering your project. But potentially, that could be a thing, and it could be a really clear signal. Like, okay, this costs, I don't know, 25K per month. We should do it, or we should not do it. Then you're pretty much leaving the MKR holders the decision of what should we do. So that's that's a bit what we're trying to solve here. David is asking.
Tim has also hopped on stage as a follow-up to his earlier question. So we'll fit him in and then maybe work through a couple more slides and then hop back to questions.
But cool. Thanks for the holler. Thanks for the holler. I appreciate it. I was literally about to just like slink off back into the chat, but I figured it would be important, at least for the record, to say that I think that the intention here is fantastic. And the work that's gone into it, I think, is one of those things that we're all not noticing as a community. All of this hidden work happened to bring this presentation here, right? That's exactly what Juan is talking about. There's a ton of hidden talent hidden around our units. And I guess the word of the day is hidden because I haven't had enough coffee. But the main point is that this actually is kind of a little bit elevating an intention that's been in the community for a while. MakerMan, I think, has been the leading proponent, which is like, let's actually flip this whole thing into requesting what we want. And so the questions I was asking was, do we think that Maker holders are going to be doing that? And the follow-up to that is, what happens when they're mutually exclusive? Like, let's fund only real-world assets, and then there aren't enough arrangers or whatever. Or it's like, oh, well, let's only do crypto collateral, and there's not enough crypto collateral, right? So yes. There's other flip sides to that, but I figured I wanted to at least open that stage to say, I think the other part of this is that there needs to be either a working group or some sort of vision collation, which has also existed in the community in the past. So It's not just one way. That's my main thing. They're always two-way streets, right? So there's this two-way thing about the work coming from the units doing it, and then there's this not two-way street coming from, we assume to be maker holders, but I think that there could be a larger coalition on that other side, and that was my main point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is something that we've been thinking about, and we called it MIP 100 because it's still something that we do not have. So we'll say, okay, we'll write it at some point. But we feel that the missing part right now that would be quite important is to propose work. So potentially you prioritize the willingness to do something. And this could be the vision that you're talking about, or the cohesive vision. And then you have these projects which are actually, it's a bit of a request for proposal, and these projects are actually answering that. So you could potentially have another core unit being like, there's no way that dashboard costs that much. We can do it for half the price. It will be better. Or you can be like, no, we want the expensive one because, I don't know, we trust the team more. So you have this, you have these things where you're actually balancing a bit, and if you don't want the delegates to do that for any reason, you could potentially have a price, right? So if you write a good request for proposal and you get a project being funded, you will get a 0.5%. I don't know, I'm making the numbers up, but you could incentivize the actually giving direction and helping with all the project management by different mechanisms. We didn't include it in the presentation because we feel that it's already a lot of new information and even
I mean, with everything in Maker, it's always the start of a dialogue, right? So I think that there's a lot of power to this, right? Like, one of my concerns with KPIs, I think other people's things, is that we'll just end up with 10 sets of them and be like, whoops, well, we were bad at that, right? And so the concern with this thing is that, oh, well, now we'll just end up with 100 projects and prioritize all of them, right? Which is like not the end state you want to be in. So I think we're going to address those points. So I'm going to hop off and you guys can continue.
Yeah, we have a slide to discuss why we think that KPIs fall a bit short in this situation that we need, but we can talk about that later if you guys are interested.
Yeah, it looks like we have a lot of questions queued up that'll be answered by the next couple slides. So if you want to continue for a couple and then break when you're ready, we'll hop back into Q&A then.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's again recapitulate a bit what governance wants. So on the capital side, they want to pay for value, not for workforce. So potentially governance doesn't care who is doing the work. and they want to understand the true cost of maintaining and improving the protocol. So how much is it to keep the lights on, to keep the show running, and how much is to grow into these different markets and opportunities that we have. On the workforce, we have Maker wants to be able to attract the best teams to deliver the high quality value for the protocol. So we want to make sure that we are capturing the workforce and that they are ready to jump in. So low barriers to entry and enable the top talent to contribute immediately and focus on the work. And finally, we've been discussing this a lot with the end game plan. So on the work side, they want it to be less complex, easier to understand, better measurements, and easier to measure. And we want to build this potentially as a future-proof solution, so something that we can implement today to solve today's problems. And if the end game plan is enabled, to be able to migrate to that in an easier way. So for the implementation and the next steps, we do believe that immediate action is required. However, we don't want to start with a MIP. We believe that that's not the way. Potentially, we need to do a lot of work before actually reaching the MIP. So we want to start with other things, which I'm going to explain in the next few slides. And this might bring up more questions, so guys, feel free to keep writing them or to hop in the mic later. But the step 0, potentially core units or the creation of core units become permissionless. So almost any wallet can become a core unit and be able to receive a stream or an amount of DAI to produce something. So anyone can spin a core unit and the budget is set at 0. Then in the long term, we need to see if what the role of the facilitator is, or if there's anything to do with the end game design, as we were discussing. Potentially, this core unit could have permissions to, for example, change rates or adjust different things. Or so these are things that need to be considered, and we're not forgetting about them. It's more how do we deal with them. The other thing that should be done, and we hope that this is not very, very hard for almost anyone, but it's like, okay, what is my core unit working on? These are the projects or the things that we do on a daily or weekly basis. Even a contributor could do it for themselves. Like, this is the amount of hours that I spend on each thing. What is that, or how is that producing value to the protocol? So again, this is examples of 2 core units that are defining all the projects that they have. So keeping the lights on would be, this is done entirely by core unit X, and it's 100 DAI. Same thing for the second and third, and the fourth project is actually cross collaboration between 2 core units. So X is requiring 100 DAI and Y is requiring 250 DAI. So that project would be 350 DAI. So this is just to show how, if this project was funded, then we would stream this amount of DAI to these different wallets. So that's a bit how the project would be proposed by the core units with the respective budget line. And then we will have to define the budget. This would be done by the MKR holders, and there are numerous ways of defining the budget. One could be global, so this is the budget that we're spending, period. Then you could have different business objectives. Then you can make the numbers absolute. For example, this many amount of millions, or it could be relative. So if we produce more revenues, we have more budget to test on marketing. Or if the surplus buffer has this amount of money, we can spend it. Otherwise, we're not. And they also could have different permissions. And this point is quite important, right? For example, if we were to define business objectives, one of them keeping the lights on, and we defined several projects that are there to keep the light on, we could say, okay, this project needs to get funded no matter what. So if we ever run out of DAI, we should sell MKR to fund these core units, because it's extremely important that that these core units get this money to keep the lights on. The opposite also being true. So if the surplus buffer is more than X, we should fund these other projects. So that could be defined as well and discussed. But that's a bit how the MKR holders would define the budget. In this example, we put three budgets. One is protocol operations, the other one is the DAO operations, so anything that supports, and the third one was the protocol development. So moving on to, for example, layer 2 or exploring new markets, etc. I'm seeing a lot of messages in the chat, so I'm freaking out a bit. But yeah, let's keep going unless Retro stops me.
I was gonna say, if you want to hop, I don't know how to click buttons in Crowdcast, but I think this would be a good opportunity to address David's question, especially with this slide, the last one that was up. David asks, what's the difference between projects and the...
One user wants to come on stage. Maybe it's David.
It is the other David.
So many Davids.
Yeah, but real briefly, I believe this was already addressed, David Euro's question. So if there's some further clarity that's needed, let us know, and we'll go ahead and get David Grant online. While he's making his way to the stage, the question that he submitted earlier was, we should define what a project is, i.e. is a request to onboard collateral a project. And David, if you'd like to provide some more color, floor is yours.
Yeah, no, just thinking from the perspective of CES, I think, you know, a collateral onboarding group has an ongoing mandate to address the onboarding of collateral. And to do that, we need to maintain a development team and skilled people. We also, in doing that work, and actually we're talking about this within our CU right now, we see various initiatives, I guess I call them project initiatives, where we can improve the collateral onboarding and making, for example, MIT-21 more scalable. My key concern about making it all about projects is accessibility to the skilled labor you're potentially going to need to implement those budgets. Like, you can't onboard and hire those people immediately, and there's no guarantee that those people are necessarily, you know, we have availability of skilled people in those other core units. So yeah, you know, I was asking, would there be sort of some level of core unit budgeting for the maintenance work so that we can staff up appropriately, and then use those same staff to execute on budgets, or yeah, I think that would be the challenge, is you know, retaining skilled people to implement the projects on short notice. That sort of needs to balance out, but I see a lot of positives in this, because we don't have direction right now as a core unit, which, you know, longer term, which way the protocol wants to go. And if we can, and in fact, we're seriously considering creating signal requests for the work that we'd like to innovate on, which requires a bit more of a longer term commitment. I guess you classify that as a project, but yeah, I think it's important to define what a project is. Is it, you know, would every standard collateral onboarding be treated as a project? You know, arranges requesting funding. Some clarification now would be useful. But yeah, I think this is a really good initiative that addresses constraints we're seeing in our core unit. The only worry I would have is if it's 100% project and we don't have a sort of baseline for that maintenance work, then how we're going to staff the right people to execute these projects. So that's all I really wanted to say.
Yeah, so that's a great point. I think that we're talking about two different things at the same time. One of them is what is a project and can be handled as a project. That's one point, and the other one is what do we do, or how do we ensure that some kind of stability for core units or contributors. Could the MKR holders defund a project within a day or two, or should we put some locks? So we have this slide that we made. I don't know if you can make it a bit bigger, Retro, but yeah, the periods. We still need to define that, right? There's a trade-off between flexibility for the MKR holders and stability for the core unit, and this goes into budgets, voting, freeze periods. How long in advance do we need to do that? So the SES example is, let's say that you guys say, okay, the next year we could potentially onboard these 20 collateral types. What we need is, I don't know, an engineer to write all the adapters. We need legal people to review A, B, and C. So basically, you have all these projects that are separated from each other. So it would be really, really easy for the MKR holders to say, yeah, we want you to work on these 3 for the next 6 months. The rest, not for now. So potentially they would rank those projects higher, and you would get the funding to actually work on those processes. So that's, for me, that's 2 different things. One is the periods and the trade-offs, and the other one is can it be a project or not? Yeah, I don't know if we should go back to the slide, or if there's another question, Retro.
Yeah, Peyton's had one queued up here for a while. Let me bring it on screen. He brings up the point of, how do we prevent project-based allocations from becoming a race to the bottom where cost is prioritized over quality?
So there are 100 ways of. I don't know if there are working solutions, but that's a very good point. Is cost the only thing? So potentially no. Potentially someone that has already worked for Maker, for example, or that they know the protocol, they could rank higher. Then you can say, okay, we're going to do proof of work or some NFTs or whatever. So there are a lot of solutions to explore. We're not saying that the MKR holders should vote on the cheapest. Like, this is not an automatic thing at all. Actually, let me find. I forgot in which slide I was. I was here. So potentially in this case, for example, the real world assets project is being ranked last, even if it's cheaper than others, right? Well, here you don't have different projects for that are competing for the same budget, but this could potentially happen, where you say, yeah, we want the expensive one. We know already what we're getting into. We like this more than the others. Arguably, you can say that projects are not identical, even if they are very, very similar. So it's up to the MKR holders on how to answer that.
And then, as a quick follow-up, and I think a lead into getting back to the presentation, Peyton also asked, could we hear a bit about how budget allocations would work within projects? How would they be handled when different core units or individuals want to contribute to Maker holder-backed project?
Oh, I don't think I understand the question, Peyton. I don't know if you want to jump on the mic, or maybe Retro, you get it, but.
Believe he's talking to the point demonstrated by the third project there with the X and the Y, where 2 teams would potentially want to contribute to the same project.
Yes, so that's really up to the core units. You cannot, as we mentioned before, you cannot force, and this happens today, you can't force core units to collaborate. So core units that do want to collaborate for any given reason, or because they like working together, or they enjoy their services, or some front end with some back end to create something, they would include that in the project. So for example, if GovAlpha needed the services from Data Insights, they would say, okay, for GovAlpha, we need 3 guys that are going to do the analysis and develop this, and we're going to use the data from Data Insights to work on that. So this could happen that, for example, Data Insights is like, we want this amount, and you're like, I don't think that we're going to get voted on if you put that price. So you could either look for a competitor, or Data Insights could do the same thing and split to their own project. But basically, it's conversations that need to happen at the core unit level, which is the workforce, and not at the MKR holders level, where you're kind of like forcing or begging or asking people to do the work when it's actually your protocol. It's the MKR holders protocol, so they should be the ones directing the work.
And then as a quick follow-up, Peyton is now wondering how MKR holders will deal with potentially all the different proposals that would be coming in for the various projects.
Yeah, I think it would be actually, I think this would make it easier, right? Because right now what you're dealing with is like, okay, there's a new core unit. What do they do? Do they bring in value? Yes, no, we think they could. How, what are they going to build? Okay, let's check on the roadmap. So we actually believe that this method will make it easier for the MKR holders to decide on what to do. And then potentially the MKR holders are the one buying. So it's the core unit's job, let's say, to actually sell the project to the DAO and say, hey, we think this is valuable, this is how, and show the business case to the DAO. So I think it will be actually easier than reviewing all the budgets that there are today, all the core units, making sure that that everything makes sense. Then it's like, okay, this core unit would make sense because it's serving these other core units. But if you take out the other core units, so there's so many if scenarios right now that the delegates are dealing with, that it's almost impossible to actually make sense of the current situation. I think with projects it will be much easier, because then you're saying, okay, these core units want to work together. Let's fund this project. And you already have the queries that are going to work, how and what does the project finished, how is it defined, and then you can set different milestones.
And then as another follow-up, Peyton also just dropped into chat. He thinks that it's much easier to propose a project than a core unit. So forking other projects could be quite valuable, but he expects far more proposals to come in from projects than core units.
I mean, I think that would be a great problem to have. Other protocols, what they do is that they require people to stake tokens to propose something. Then you can decide if you slash them in which scenarios or what happens. But having a lot of projects and a lot of people that want to produce value for the DAO sounds like a great issue to have. I don't think it's something we have today. So yeah.
Yeah, and the one tidbit to add on to that as well is if you take a look at trying to compare two core units, it's a little bit of a nebulous problem based on how the MIP 39 is defined and what the potential authors are trying to communicate through that. With a proposal-based framework, we envision that the work would be the focal point. It would be a lot easier to compare the two. So an increased amount would not only represent more options for the work specifically, instead of the workforces to then go out and deliver it, and focus the conversation again on concrete and actionable feedback from governance to use the two comparisons to come up with the best solution. With that, there's about 4 observations or points of clarity that we can address at the end. So if you'd like to hop back into the slides, we can get to those at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, and another thing that might, especially for those listening to this recording, in the long term, you might want to add something for minority voter protections. So potentially this would do what the majority want, which is good. But then you could include some minority voter protection. So someone that only has, I don't know, 5%, we want to include some kind of protection for them and make sure that their projects get funded at least by that percentage. So that's something that we might want to consider in the long term as well. And the step 3 is profit, of course, but these are some of the advantages that we will see, is that the MKR holders will choose directly the projects that will forward their vision for the DAO, even if it's not unified. Then we will uncover a lot of non-value added. So anything that MKR holders do not perceive as value is potentially non-value, or at least not for them, which is the client. So this will uncover a lot of that. And yeah, then I think in the chat it came the admin tasks that each core unit has. We could look for different ways of centralizing this or optimizing them at different levels. So you could have an admin core unit that says, okay, if you want me to do the admin for you, you need to include this amount of budget to your project, and then we'll do it. So that's something that could be solved as well. And then the important part is that it allows for easy competition. So if you see a project that you think you can do better, not necessarily cheaper, but better, then you can definitely do it in an easy way compared to, oh, you just need to deal with bureaucracy, create a core unit, potentially hop 100 hurdles, and finally you might get a budget to do that one project that you wanted. And then, yeah, we mentioned already the things that are still to define, which are very, very important. So the periods, we already see it with governance today, that it's too slow when we want it to go fast, and it's too fast when we want it to go slow. But there's this trade-off between flexibility and stability for core units. So we started thinking about different numbers. For example, that the budget should be frozen a quarter before. So potentially we should know let's say on the 1st of January, we should already know what's happening in April 1st in terms of budget. And then you could do some kind of rolling between 3 months or maybe 6 months. I guess it depends on what works. And yeah, we'll be definitely looking forward to get this this feedback or this input from different core units. Some budgets might make sense to be defined yearly. I don't know, maybe in terms of oracles or maybe Gov Alpha. So I'm not entirely sure about that. But others might also make sense to have a shorter term, especially if they are higher risk or if they're more of an experiment. And yeah, this is the summary of things that should happen if we want to move forward with this. Right now, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are looking for as much feedback as possible. If people find that, or if the DAO finds that there's value in this, we could do some either MIP 13 or a signal request to see if we should move forward with this. I know that there's a KPI proposition or proposal right now up for vote. So depending on what happens with that, it might not make sense to also add this one, because that might mean a lot of overhead for different core units. But yeah, if that happens and if this signal request or MIP 13 passes, then we could start documenting all the CUs as project based, report the budget, and core units could also propose other budgets. So I had this conversation with, for example, with Peyton not long ago. He said, "Oh, we have all these cool ideas to do, but raising the budget right now might not make sense. We don't want to be tone deaf," and that's a super valid concern. But maybe one of the ideas is something that the MKR holders really want. So potentially that should go to the top of the list. As we were saying in the step one, we need to review the data, make sure that this framework is working, and do any enhancements that are needed. Then define the DAO's budget as project-based against the core units lists. Explore the gaps. Step two, priorities through on-chain voting. We need to test different funding models and the timeframes to see what works and what doesn't. So this might be messy in the beginning, but yeah, hopefully it's something that it's done at least smoothly. And the step three is reach DAO profitability, right? It's what we want, to make sure that we have the control over how much we're spending and on what. And yeah, we need to incorporate other incentives, course correction, security tools for MKR holders. There are all these dashboards and really useful tools that we are seeing across the board. So making sure that those are readily available. And then finally, that's when the MIP should come to life. So MIPify it and make sure that this is coded and potentially templify it for the MetaDAOs if this is something useful for other DAOs as well. So that brings us to the end. If you guys want to start shooting or hopping into the mic, you're super welcome to do it.
Yeah, as we're waiting for any final questions to roll in, there's a couple points that were brought up by Tadeo and Assad that I think would be worth recapping. The first one is talking about upfront costs or admin costs. Again, the example that Tadeo brings up is if he has a contract for a yearly upfront cost, he would need that at the start of the project then to enable the delivery of the work. How would that potentially be addressed? Is that flexible or is it a set rule?
So if the project is shorter than 1 year long, you could just budget the full year if you really need it, and then the second time you propose the same project, you could make it cheaper because you already have the subscription. If someone has the subscription free for any reason, then they would be able to make it for cheaper. So this is something that's happening already, and it should be there and accounted in the project. There's no reason that's a problem.
And then hopping back to a question that David just submitted, he asked, how are the projects going to be evaluated then with KPIs, and reporting would also be project-based then, he's assuming.
Yes, so ideally you have milestones in the project, and those milestones are done, not done, right? If you promise to ship a feature, the milestone is this feature is shipped. So it's very binary compared to KPI, which tends to be more onboard 50,000 users or something.
And then just to touch on a subject that Tim brought up, he said, do we talk about global caps? In the chat, he also talked about having it project specific, and I think it would be good to touch on DAO encompassing as well.
Yeah, as we mentioned at the beginning, we could have a global cap, or we could have different budgets for different business objectives with different permissions. So we could have a global cap that would be the easy part or the simple solution. But you can also say, okay, for keeping the lights on, we're going to do this super budget that if it ever gets depleted, we need to start selling MKR, like minting and selling MKR, because we cannot afford to not have this budget for these projects. So that might be more complex to set up, but might be worth it. So hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, and then jumping over to PVL, sorry if I missed this question earlier, but he is asking, have you considered integrating quadratic funding mechanisms in your proposal?
Short answer is no, and the reason is that we're not. This is not changing how MKR holders vote. The main counter argument for quadratic funding is civil resistance, which is something we do not have nowadays. But this doesn't touch the way we vote. It just touches the way we fund things during the work in Maker. So that's we have not considered that. No.
Cool. And with the chat quieting down, then I think that this will be the last point to review. Tadeo brings up that a lot of projects could be under-delivered, not going noticed due to a lack of governance bandwidth. This kind of touches on Peyton's earlier concept as well of the lowest price always winning. So speaking to some of the mechanics to prevent that I think would be a good thing to highlight.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would argue actually the opposite. I would argue that what's happening today, where you fund a core unit, you get a lot of under delivering core units, and they are being unnoticed because there's no way of seeing what they're doing. In a project, it's much easier. It's like, is the project delivered? Yes, no. What were the milestones that they promised? Are they done? You can even say like, you need to submit the proof. I don't know, online or on chain, even saying we did it with a screenshot or whatever it is. So yeah, I would argue that it actually makes that much better, much better.
And to close us out, then Tadeo has hopped on stage.
No, because I really like this model. And one of the things, my point is, I think similar to Peyton's is yes, I think you qualify asking up front already for a lot more like what's your success criteria. I think for now, where like I don't know, if I'm looking at my own team, like we have a lot of projects in mind. Maybe these projects that we've thought about after having the budget that we present to the community and we're going to do. So this kind of brings this up front. Like, we want to do these projects. These are our success criteria. Do you accept it? Yes. That makes sense. But it's more on what Peyton was saying. It's like, I expect then, instead of having one Deku budget, I'm going to give you, maybe when I start, maybe 5 or 6 project space proposals, plus maybe 3-4 more along the line. A lot of them will also be part of other people's proposals, right? So if we're looking at Maker Teleport, I'm not going to do a Maker Teleport data proposal. I'm just going to basically collaborate with the other teams working there and join that. But it's more of the potential explosion of the amount of proposals. And if we're keeping the same governance mechanisms, that would mean that we expect the people of delegates we have right now to review all of them. All delegates reviewing all proposals. So maybe my question here is a little more is like, do we expect, like, yeah, for me, this would be, we would just have way too many things that people wouldn't be able to check, even though they're formatted and have more information presently.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if Tadeo was breaking up. Sorry if my connection was breaking up or it was Tadeo's, but yeah, you cut for a couple of seconds. But I would argue the opposite. I would argue that right now the MKR holders are giving you a budget, and it's not clear at all what that budget is going to be used on. And for example, you mentioned Maker Teleport. That might be great. So there could be the Maker Teleport project that has the line for data insights. And if the MKR holders that want that, then you get the budget for that. If they don't, why right now are you spending even time on something that the MKR holders might not want? So right now you have no visibility as a core unit to get any type of direction, and the MKR holders have no control on what to spend your time on. You could be at the end of the year, yeah, we worked on all these projects, and the MKR holders are, we don't want any of that. Why have you worked on those projects? It's like, well, you see my mandates, and then your mandate is grow, and you say, well, we try to do this to grow. So right now there's no control for the MKR holders to actually give any type of direction. So we think that this is a better way of doing that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then is it correct in thinking that technically right now I can move my budget, my core unit budget, to a project budget? Still have the same things. Not have the benefits, let's say, of breaking it up per budget. But I could then redelegate the budget to, sorry, maybe that's not the best example. Would you have a data stuff project that is, there's a group of people that mainly act as a budget committee, and from there they would then create projects or accept projects from myself or other data teams, no? You consider that like kind of like having like meta projects in a way?
I don't understand what meta projects would solve.
So the meta project is data work. It's a couple, like it's a lot of money.
But work in itself, it's useless. Like what we want to provide is value, and the value might be having or producing the Maker teleport, or actually being on every L2, or having real world assets. So that's the value. The work is just how do we get there. So once that there's this map that's ideally created by either the delegates or the as in the endgame plan it's called the DMC or DTV. I'm really bad with the. But potentially there's a map where it says, hey, we want to achieve this. How do we do it? And then you just submit a project. You know how much you're spending. You're like, okay, we are able to provide this. So how do we do it? And if your project doesn't get funded, then it means that you're not producing the value that they want, or maybe they don't see it. Maybe it's full of value, but the MKR holders don't want it for any reason. So it's a bit letting the MKR holders control directly the work that's being produced instead of just funding good intentioned core units that might deliver on what the MKR holders want or not.
Right. But then I think there's a point here to make, which I think we are suffering right now of, like, we need some sort of specialization. So we're asking the same person to vote on whether, let's say, the data team is good enough to actually fulfill the mandate, and whether the mandate from the data team is good enough. And maybe public-facing data is easy to understand, but then it's like, I don't know. I told you, like, I want to build a amazing, super efficient database that to serve this new type of data. It looks so great, but then I think that requires an expert to be able on the other side to be able to judge whether that's good or not. And I think
right.
we would kind of have that problem on the project base, right? Because it's like, what's the merit of a project that we did? Yeah, I think, yeah.
So the project, if the project is just exposing the data, the MKR holders might not find that useful. They might want, for example, a dashboard, right? So is the dashboard working? Yes, no. Why is it working? Is it a data problem or a front-end problem? Then if you teamed up with a team that does not deliver, then that's another discussion to have. But basically, you would actually deliver some kind of value to the MKR holders, whatever it is. So if the MKR holders want this dashboard and you need the data from Data Insights, the dashboard should get funded. So actually, I think you're actually giving us great points to our forum post, which is right now, to evaluate core units, you need experts, because you need to understand every single moving part in every single project, compared to, hey, do we want this project? Yes, no. Is the project done? Yes, no. So if you're supporting a project and it gets done, then great, it got done. It doesn't matter how, and you don't need an expert. It's like, is the dashboard working? Yeah, I clicked on every single part. It works perfectly. So done. Data Insights did a great job, or maybe not. We don't know. Compared to, oh, is Data Insights providing the right tool for this other core unit that's doing the dashboard? Oh, I think they do, but they are using a different language. So you actually need an expert to nowadays much more than you would in these project-based situations.
Okay, that makes sense. My last point, I'll let him. It's on the what do you think about on the maintenance side, on like ongoing work? How would that fit? Do you simply reuse the same project logic, and you can include milestones? I think, I don't know. Yeah, wonder on that.
I mean, some core units are going to have a harder time with this. I was thinking about Go Alpha, for example. A lot of I collaborated with Go Alpha some lifetime ago, but a lot of it feels like you're not getting stuff done because it's a lot of firefighting, a lot of talking to people, a lot of answering questions. So would you write in a project answering the queries from the community? I think you should. I think that's a project that would provide a lot of value to keep the DAO working. So yeah, I think that that keeping the lights on is quite valuable, and we should know exactly how much that costs compared to growing into different things.
Yeah, and Tadeo's point, I think, brings up a couple other things that I want to highlight with the approach that SES is taking with this. We're focusing on the short-term need of budget improvements and what needs to be solved immediately, for lack of a better term, while also trying to incorporate the ongoing discussions and ideas that are under development, whether it's the end game plan or other innovative ideas, just to make sure that this becomes a platform for delivering capital instead of just a specific framework. We really want this to be adaptable and address all the challenges that you're saying, but do it in a concerted effort so that when we do make a decision for specific implementation, we know why we're doing it, we know the expectations behind it, and there's a way to track if it's working or if it needs to be improved or not.
Yeah, plus one to add to that and reiterate an earlier point. I think today's examples of specificity are super helpful because examples are always good. But someone very wise once told me that a DAO is just another way of allocating capital and energy, and it still proves to be true. I hope they're listening at one point. But the thing I wanted to say that relates to that is the other side needs to be fleshed out more, right? Because right now we have the need for experts to understand core units at a project level, and it's like crazy scope problems because it's just, how are you going to be an expert in everything? And so it just ends up being like, oh, just explain like I'm 5. Okay, next core unit, right? And that just doesn't work at all. So I'm happy to roll up my sleeves in any way I can to serve as like a voice of some maker holders or whatever. But I think if we can start to actually, I don't want to use the word clustering, but it's what comes to mind. You sort of think of these projects in sort of like different frames, like these are products, these are infrastructure, these are high level aspiration goals. This is vague community stuff, right? And then start to appoint like, not review committees, but maybe that's the word for now that it comes to mind, but basically thinking about, okay, what is the review process of this actually going to look like? Who are the folks who want to serve there for some limited amount of time for that cycle, and then they stop and they move to another one? That will allow sort of expertise to sort of percolate on the other end of these projects, right? So that not only do we have good projects coming in that have clear milestones and good roadmaps, but we also have people who can understand them on the other side and say, yeah, that doesn't cost that much, right? Or they can say, this is a worthy goal, right? And then the conversation comes more about how many things are on the list, right? In any organization, it's just how many rows in the spreadsheet of output can you actually do? Because you can have 500 rows, but you can only do about 100, right? This is why organizations keep growing by headcount, and it's the completely wrong way to look at it. And you should really be pruning the rows the whole entire time to allocate your capital towards the biggest leverage that you can provide, right? Like Maker has this enormous potential. So anyway, I'll stop with the platitudes.
No, that's great, Tim. That's exactly how we're thinking. So thanks for your comments. I don't know if anyone wants to hop on the mic as well. I have 2 more questions from Peyton. The first one, can you reshare the screen, Retro, please? But the first one was thinking of how you could attach MKR as a bounty compensation as well for the more employment-like projects that require continued attention. So this is a great point, and we actually still need to define that. Right now, what we see, I would say in almost every core unit, I can only think of growth that they have like performance-based MKR bonuses, but it's usually retention MKR. So we were thinking of saying, okay, if this contributor has been getting this amount of DAI for the last, I don't know, year, they would get this amount of MKR at whatever price was a year ago. So we were thinking about different solutions. Someone could argue like, no, like we don't want to have any retention bonus. We'll do performance bonus. We were also thinking about automation bonus. We teased this concept a bit in the past, saying if you manage to automate one of the projects, let's say that a maintenance project, for example, taking notes, costs you 25K per month, and you manage to automate it and make it cost 1K per month, the difference, that's all money that the DAO is making. So you could potentially get a bonus in MKR of, I don't know, let's say 2 years of that amount worth of MKR, just because you're saving the protocol a lot of money for the rest of the existence. So that's the automation bonus is something that we should really be looking to as well. So yeah, thanks for that. And the last question is about KPIs. So yeah, there were So there's this solution about KPIs and why do we think that they fall short? And again, we're not saying that that KPIs are bad. We should strive to keep using KPIs. We actually use OKRs in SES, so it's something we're quite familiar with. And it sucks to not hit the deadlines, especially when you're aggressive at putting all these deadlines. But yeah, first of all, we do think that the KPIs fall short to allocate budget. Because there's negative or no incentive to do the right thing versus doing the things right. So you could be working on something that's completely non-desirable for the MKR holders, as we mentioned before, and do it perfectly. So yeah, you hit your KPI, you get 100. Should you get a lot of funding for that? Maybe not. The principal agent problem, so the KPIs are defined by the core units. And then, yeah, you can say, yeah, but the MKR holders need to approve it. Potentially, the MKR holders do not know how to do this. And again, we go to the wrong type of conversation, which is how are they doing the work instead of what type of work are they doing. Then it was not very clear, at least for me, if the KPI should determine the level of compensation or continued investment. So it means that this is easy to game. Like you could say, oh, I think we can onboard 1,000 clients, so we're going to put the KPI at 100. Sounds reasonable for everyone else, so we'll just put it there, and then we'll crash the KPI. And the opposite was also brought up, which is sometimes the workforce does not have direct control over the KPI. So you could say we're going to get, well, no, maybe that's not the best one, but you could say we're going to bring this much revenue for the DAO, and then if you don't control how the revenue is produced, then you would have.
I think we may have lost Juan. To pick up the point that he just left off on, the KPIs are unclear.
Less really, really well, and if it could work.
Yeah, it looks like we fully lost them. Ending on that note then, we appreciate everybody's time and excitement around the proposal. Well, we think that this could be a compelling change for MakerDAO, and we also think that it could be very useful in the short term and the long term, as we touched on with the step plan for implementing this. A lot of the questions that have been brought up talk about not necessarily full fringe cases, but some that are still outside of that core principle. So what we're envisioning is a process where we first work to paint with broad brushstrokes improvements, and then try to force as much as we can within the core of the new framework, and then engineer specific use cases for, again, broader strokes than just specific core units and projects. So Juan, we lost you around the middle of that KPI slide, but I think we got the point. If there's any closing thoughts that you'd like to make, I think now would be the time before we wrap up.
I think Tim wants to justify his vote as a delegate, so he's voting for the KPIs budget allocation. I don't think it's mutually exclusive either. I just don't think that KPIs should be the way of allocating budget. I think that we need to do a complete revamp. KPI seems like it's going to take a lot of time, and I personally don't think that it's a step in the right direction. However, if that's what the MKR holders want, we're happy to explore it. But we would prefer some project-based budget allocation where the MKR holders have more of a say on what's being done instead of how. Discuss.
Thinking for a second before I speak. I'm not here to justify votes per se. I think you summed it up, right? And I think I've been saying this the entire time, actually, on the forums. But as you noted, the forums are quite noisy. These aren't particularly mutually exclusive. The exercise that we'll do with KPIs may or may not be the right framing, but it will definitely be something that builds more cohesion and alignment around what the actual problems we're trying to solve are. And then I hope that the timing with this initiative sort of goes together. That's my optimistic hope. But at the same time, willing to put the grit in and the work, because I think that's part of like what delegates should kind of do, because we don't really have some of those functions on the MKR holders side. And so this is actually one of the functions we can sort of design, which is why I'm sort of excited about where it fits in.
Yeah, think how powerful it's going to be to actually ask core units, like, in which projects are you spending your money right now? And if it's like, oh, admin is 80%, it's like, okay, you're not being very efficient with the money we're giving you. So I think that's actually a much more powerful thing than, oh, my KPI is to, I don't know, produce 100 whatever widgets, and then, yeah, I made 90 or I made 120. I'm great at making widgets. And again, it's very hard for a delegate to, especially if it's a core unit that's very specific, you might not know if that's even good or not. So
or a facilitator with a large team, right? Like you have one person who's a technical expert on this one thing, and they're like, write KPIs. They're like, no. What do you do? They're like, succeed at the thing I do. You know, that's where you can end up in the wrong place. That being said, we can try and steer these initiatives to work together so that they aren't in these like silos or whatever. Like one can lead into the other, which is sort of the arc that I'm trying to steward through this mire we find ourselves in, I guess.
That's great. Yeah, so I don't know if anyone else has anything else to say, but thanks everyone for coming. We'll have the recording if Crowdcast doesn't rug the recording again. We'll have it soonish. And yeah, thanks everyone, and we'll see you in the forum.
Perfect. Have a great weekend.